Okay, so you're getting ready for a knowledge engineer interview.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We've got all these resources from RoleCatcher,
Mm-hmm.
things like career guides and sample interview questions,
Yay.
even some of their AI tools to help us out.
Oh, cool.
It's really more than just knowing like the right answer.
Yeah.
It's understanding what those interviewers are actually looking for when they're asking these questions.
Exactly. RoleCatcher gives us that insider perspective, which is what we're going to break down for you today.
So think of this deep dive as your cheat sheet
Right?
for not just what to say, but why it matters to those people sitting across from you.
I like it.
And get this, RoleCatcher can actually analyze how companies use AI in the hiring process.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to weave those insights in as we go.
Okay.
So you're not just prepared, you're ahead of the curve.
I love that.
Okay, so let's dive into the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
RoleCatcher gets really specific about what a knowledge engineer actually does.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond those vague job titles.
Definitely. Yeah. It breaks down the core tasks, you
Yeah.
know, integrating knowledge into systems, building AI solutions.
Okay.
It's less about crunching data and more about being a digital brain architect.
Okay, digital brain architect. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those architects usually work?
Well, RoleCatcher's data shows mainly offices,
Mm-hmm.
but remote work is becoming more and more common.
Right.
But here's the thing, it's mentally demanding work.
Okay.
Sometimes those long hours can creep in,
Yeah,
which is something to think about when you're thinking about work-life balance.
that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of demands, this field is constantly evolving.
Right.
RoleCatcher talks about big data and machine learning being huge right now.
Absolutely. Those are really driving massive growth in the job market.
Okay.
The report highlights that every industry needs intelligent systems these days,
Yeah,
meaning job security is pretty solid for knowledge engineers.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we've got high demand, good pay room for growth. That's a lot of pros.
Yeah.
What about the cons? What does RoleCatcher say about the downsides?
Well, the fast-paced nature of the field means constant learning is key. You always have to stay on top of the latest trends and technologies, or you'll fall behind.
Right. So you land that job, you're crushing it.
Yeah.
How does that career path typically unfold?
So RoleCatcher outlines 4 stages,
Okay.
starting with junior knowledge engineer, then moving up to just knowledge engineer,
Huh?
then senior knowledge engineer, and finally principal knowledge engineer.
Okay.
And each stage has specific responsibilities and challenges.
Mm.
So it's helpful to kind of envision where you want to be in, say, 5 or 10 years.
That's a good point.
Uh-huh.
It helps you target your prep to where you see yourself going.
Right.
But let's get real.
Yeah.
The part most people dread
Oh, yeah.
are those interview questions.
Of course.
RoleCatcher has a ton of examples, and I think we should dive right into some of the heavy hitters.
Let's do it. Let's not just give answers,
No.
but let's give the strategy behind them.
Right.
Why interviewers ask these questions, what they're really looking for, and how to stand out.
All right, fire away.
Okay, let's start with a classic. Can you explain the difference between supervised and unsupervised machine learning?
Oh, the one everyone's heard but still gets tripped up on?
Exactly. It's so fundamental, interviewers use it to kind of gauge your basic understanding.
Uh-huh.
A clear, concise answer sets the tone for the rest of the interview.
Okay, so how should someone approach this without sounding like they're reading from a textbook?
Start by defining machine learning itself,
Okay.
just in simple terms,
Mm.
and then clearly explain the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning,
Right.
highlighting the role of labeled data in supervised learning.
So something like machine learning is teaching computers to learn from data. In supervised learning, we give the algorithm labeled examples like pictures of cats and dogs, so it learns to tell them apart. In unsupervised learning, we give it unlabeled data and let it find patterns on its own.
Perfect. Concise avoids jargon. Even someone who's never heard of machine learning can follow along.
All right, so you've nailed that definition.
Yeah.
What kind of follow-up questions might come next?
They might ask, can you give a real-world example of each type of learning?
Yeah.
This is where your prep comes in,
Right.
understanding different applications.
So for supervised learning, you could mention spam filters.
Mm-hmm.
Like the algorithm learns from emails labeled as spam to identify future junk.
Right.
And for unsupervised learning, maybe customer segmentation.
Yep.
Grouping customers based on their buying habits, even if you don't have predefined groups to start with.
Spot on. It shows you can connect the concept to real problems, which is what knowledge engineers do.
Yeah.
And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can give you a real edge.
How so?
Imagine this. You upload your resume to RoleCatcher, and their AI analyzes it against specific job descriptions.
Okay.
It highlights any skills or experiences related to supervised or unsupervised learning that are missing from your resume.
Wow. So it's like a personalized checklist.
Tailored to the job you're going for. So you're not just talking about these concepts. Your resume actually reflects your experience with them.
Exactly. It helps you tailor your application and even your interview answers to what the company is looking for.
That's really smart. Okay, what's another question we should be ready for?
All right, let's tackle how do you measure the accuracy of a machine learning model?
Okay.
This one dives into evaluating performance. Interviewers want to know if you understand the different metrics involved and when to use them.
So it's not just about building the model, it's about knowing how well it actually works.
Exactly. It shows you can critically assess the model's performance, not just blindly trust it.
Okay, so what metrics should we be prepared to discuss?
Accuracy, precision, recall, F1 score, AUC, ROC. These are all popular ones, but don't just list them off.
Okay.
Explain what each one measures, its strengths and weaknesses, and when it's most appropriate to use it. So you could say something like, accuracy is a good overall measure, but it can be misleading with imbalanced data sets. In those cases, precision and recall might be more informative.
Exactly. Show them you understand the nuances. You're not just throwing around buzzwords.
I bet there are follow-up questions here too, right?
Oh, absolutely. They might ask you to explain the difference between precision and recall,
Okay.
or which metric you'd use for a specific scenario. They want to see if you can apply these concepts, not just recite definitions.
So it's all about connecting it back to the real world. Which, speaking of real world, RoleCatcher had something interesting about the work environment for knowledge engineers.
They did. While most roles are office-based, they emphasize that the mental demands can be intense. You're not just coding, you're solving complex problems.
Right.
Often with tight deadlines.
Yeah.
This can lead to long hours, especially when you're tackling those challenging AI projects.
Okay, so it's not just about the technical skills. It's about being able to think critically under pressure. That's good to know going into this.
Back to interview prep, let's move on to another key question. Can you explain the concept of feature engineering in machine learning?
Okay. Feature engineering.
This is where your creativity shines.
Break that down for me.
It's all about selecting and transforming the right input variables to
Okay.
improve the model's performance.
Okay.
Think of it like preparing ingredients for a recipe.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So choosing the right ingredients and prepping them well leads to a better dish. In this case, the ingredients are data, and prepping them is feature engineering.
Exactly. It's about understanding the data and picking the features that are most relevant to the problem you're trying to solve. And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI comes in handy.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Their AI can analyze a job description and identify the specific types of feature engineering techniques that are likely to be important for that role.
Okay.
Then it can compare those techniques to your resume and your answers to their practice interview questions.
So it's not just giving generic advice, it's tailoring the feedback to the specific job I'm applying for.
Right. It helps you focus your preparation and show the interviewer that you understand the specific challenges they face.
Okay, so we've covered supervised versus unsupervised, learning how to measure model accuracy, and the art of feature engineering. I feel like we're just getting started.
We are. There's a lot more to cover, but for now, let's take a break.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon to dive into more of these interview questions and give you even more strategies for landing that knowledge engineer role. Hashtag TTS, The Deep Dive, episode 2024-10-27, part 2 of 3.
Welcome back to our deep dive into acing that knowledge engineer interview. We've already tackled some big concepts, but let's keep that momentum going.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
Now, I know our listeners are probably thinking about those trickier questions that interviewers love to throw out there.
Yeah.
What's next on our list?
All right, let's talk about missing data. It's the elephant in the room, you know? Real-world data is rarely perfect. So how do you handle missing data in a data set? That's a question designed to see if you can deal with the messiness of real-world scenarios.
So it's not just about knowing like a technique.
Right.
It's about understanding the implications of each approach.
Exactly. So how would you handle this question?
Well, I'd start by acknowledging that missing data is a common problem and explain, why it's detrimental to a model's performance.
Right.
Then I'd briefly describe the different methods for handling it, like deletion imputation or using algorithms that can handle missing values directly.
That's a good start. But remember to discuss the pros and cons of each method,
Okay.
and when each one is most appropriate.
Right.
For instance, deletion might be okay if the missing data is random and a small percentage of the data set.
Right.
But imputation might be necessary if the missingness is related to the target variable.
Okay, so it's about making informed decisions based on the data.
Yeah.
I bet interviewers try to dig deeper here, though.
Oh,
What kind of follow-up questions should we expect?
they might ask, what are the potential biases introduced by different imputation methods?
Okay.
This shows they're looking for someone who understands the potential pitfalls
Right.
and can critically evaluate the impact of their choices.
So you need to be ready to discuss how different imputation methods can affect the distribution of the data and potentially introduce bias into the model.
For example, imputation can shrink the variance of the data,
Okay.
while model-based imputation can introduce bias if the model used for imputation is misspecified.
Got it. It's about being honest about the limitations
Yeah.
and emphasizing careful consideration of potential biases. This is where experience shines through. But even if you haven't tackled this specifically, being aware of it is a good start.
Absolutely.
No.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about algorithm selection. How do you select the appropriate machine learning algorithm for a given problem?
Okay.
This one separates those who memorize algorithms from those who can truly apply them.
So interviewers are looking for problem solvers, not just algorithm reciters.
Exactly. They want to see that you can think critically about the problem, understand the strengths and weaknesses of different algorithms,
Okay.
and ultimately choose the best tool for the job.
So how do you even begin to answer this without getting lost in the sea of algorithms?
First, emphasize that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
A choice depends on several factors: the type of problem, the size and characteristics of the data, the desired outcome, and even the available resources.
So it's like choosing the right tool from a toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb. Each algorithm has its strengths and weaknesses, and you need to pick the one that fits the task at hand.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Now brace yourself, because the follow-up might be something like, can you give an example of when you'd choose a decision tree over a support vector machine or vice versa?
Ooh, that's getting specific.
It is. This is where your understanding of each algorithm comes into play.
Right.
You need to articulate the trade-offs involved and explain why one won't be better suited for a particular problem.
So for example, you could say, decision trees are easy to interpret and can handle both categorical and numerical features, but they can be prone to overfitting. Support vector machines are more robust to overfitting and can handle high-dimensional data, but they can be more computationally expensive.
Exactly. You've explained the trade-offs and shown that you can make informed decisions.
Okay, algorithm selection check. What other curveballs do interviewers like to throw?
All right, let's talk about the bias-variance trade-off. Can you explain the bias-variance trade-off in machine learning? This one tests your understanding of model complexity and generalization. It's a fundamental concept that can trip people up.
Right, because a model that's too simple won't capture the complexity of the data, and one that's too complex might overfit and not generalize well to new data. It's a balancing act.
Exactly. Start by defining bias and variance in simple terms,
Okay.
relating them to underfitting and overfitting. Bias is like consistently aiming for the target but missing the bullseye every time. Variance is like hitting all over the board but rarely hitting the same spot twice.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do you control this trade-off in practice? What's the secret sauce?
Well, there are a few techniques you can discuss,
Okay.
like regularization, cross-validation, and hyperparameter tuning. Regularization adds a penalty to overly complex models, discouraging overfitting.
Right.
Cross-validation helps you evaluate how well the model generalizes to new data.
Okay.
And hyperparameter tuning is like fine-tuning the knobs of your model to find the sweet spot between bias and variance.
Okay, so it's not just about building the model. It's about these techniques that ensure it performs well in the real world. Now, speaking of real-world challenges, RoleCatcher emphasizes the importance of understanding different career stages for knowledge engineers.
They do. It's important to remember that you're not just interviewing for a job.
Right.
You're potentially starting a career. They highlight that as you progress, your responsibilities shift from mostly technical tasks
Right.
to more leadership and strategic decision-making.
So thinking about those long-term goals
Yeah.
can actually inform how you approach this interview. That's smart.
Absolutely. Now let's get back to those interview questions. This next one deals with a common real-world problem: imbalanced data sets. How do you evaluate the performance of a machine learning model on an imbalanced data set?
Right. Because the real world isn't always neat and tidy with perfectly balanced data sets. This is where things get messy.
Exactly. Imagine you're building a model to detect fraudulent transactions.
Okay.
If only 0.1% of transactions are fraudulent,
Mm-hmm.
a model that always predicts not fraudulent could achieve 99.9% accuracy,
Wow.
but would completely fail to detect the actual fraudulent transactions.
Oh, wow, that's misleading.
It is. So you need to explain why standard accuracy can be a poor metric in these situations
Okay.
and introduce alternative metrics that are more appropriate,
Right.
like precision recall F1 score and AUC ROC.
So it's about choosing the right evaluation metric for the situation, not just relying on the defaults. What kind of follow-up questions might pop up here?
They might ask, what are some techniques for handling imbalanced data sets?
Okay.
This is where you can discuss strategies like oversampling the minority class, undersampling the majority class, or using cost-sensitive learning algorithms.
Okay, so it's not just about recognizing the problem. It's about having strategies to tackle it head on.
Huh.
And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can really shine.
Right. They have an AI-powered interview practice tool that allows you to record yourself answering these complex questions.
Good.
It then analyzes your response, not just for content, but also for clarity, conciseness, and even your use of technical language.
Wow, that's like having a personal coach giving you feedback on your delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just practicing the answers, you're refining how you articulate them.
Exactly.
Yep.
It helps you sound confident and knowledgeable,
Right.
even when tackling these tricky concepts.
Okay. Imbalanced data sets and AI-powered practice, check and check. What else should we be prepared for?
Let's dive into a concept that's fundamental to building ethical and responsible AI systems. How do you ensure fairness in the development and deployment of machine learning models? This one goes beyond technical expertise and delves into your awareness of the broader impact of AI.
There's a big one.
Yeah.
It's not just about building models that work.
Right.
It's about building models that are fair and don't perpetuate existing biases.
Exactly. So how would you approach this question?
Well, I'd start by acknowledging the potential risks associated with AI systems like unintended bias or discrimination. Then I'd emphasize the importance of using diverse data sets during training, carefully evaluating the model for any signs of bias, and being transparent about the model's limitations and potential impact.
That's a great start. You're demonstrating awareness and a proactive approach to mitigating bias. They might then ask for specific examples of how you've incorporated fairness principles into your past work or projects.
So it's not just about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk and showing that you actually prioritize fairness in your approach to AI. This is where having a portfolio of projects, even personal ones, can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And this ties back to RoleCatcher's AI tools. They have a feature that analyzes your resume and highlights any experiences related to fairness and ethical considerations in AI.
So if you've worked on projects that prioritize fairness, the AI will pick up on that and suggest ways to emphasize it in your application and during the interview. That's incredibly valuable.
It is. It helps you showcase your commitment to building responsible AI systems, which is becoming increasingly important for companies.
Okay. I feel like we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to stand out in a knowledge engineer interview.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet, are we?
Not even close. We've got more challenging questions, career insights, and even a peek into the world of natural language processing coming up in our final part. So stay tuned. #TTS, the Deep Dive, episode 2024-1027, part 3 of 3.
All right, we're back for the final part of our knowledge engineer interview. Deep dive. I'm ready for those advanced concepts you teased.
Let's jump right in with one that often separates the candidates. Can you explain the concept of reinforcement learning?
Oh yeah, reinforcement learning. I've heard about this.
This area of machine learning draws inspiration from how humans learn through trial and error.
It's like training a dog with treats.
Right? Exactly.
You reward good behavior, you correct bad behavior.
Yes.
Over time, they learn the trick.
In reinforcement learning, you have an agent that interacts with an environment.
Okay.
It learns to take actions that maximize rewards and minimize penalties.
Okay.
The cool part is the agent isn't explicitly told what to do. It learns from the consequences of its actions.
So is learning by doing, figuring out the best strategy on its own. Can you give me an example?
Imagine a robot learning to navigate a maze.
Okay.
It starts randomly exploring, bumping into walls, finding checkpoints.
Oh.
It gets rewards for reaching checkpoints and penalties for hitting walls. Over time, it learns which actions lead to more rewards and fewer penalties, and eventually it figures out the optimal path through the maze.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that connects back to the dog training analogy.
Yes.
So what are some real-world applications of reinforcement learning?
It's being used in robotics, training robots to perform complex tasks like grasping objects or navigating unfamiliar environments. We're seeing it in game playing, where AI agents are mastering games like chess and Go. It's even being used to optimize control systems like traffic lights or power grids and, those personalized recommendations you get online.
Yeah.
Reinforcement learning is often behind those too.
Wow, it's everywhere. I'm sensing a pattern here.
Right.
A lot of these complex topics like reinforcement learning seem to emphasize problem-solving skills, not just rote memorization.
You're absolutely right. RoleCatcher's Career Guide actually stresses that as a knowledge engineer,
Hmm.
your day-to-day work is about using these tools to solve real problems.
Okay.
It's about understanding the nuances of different approaches and making informed decisions based on the specific challenges you face.
So it's not enough to just know what reinforcement learning is. You need to be able to explain why it's the right approach for a given problem and how you'd implement it.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding nuances, let's move on to another advanced topic. Can you discuss the concept of deep learning?
Deep learning. The buzzword of the century. But
yeah.
seriously, it's more than just hype, right?
Absolutely. It's a subfield of machine learning that's responsible for some major breakthroughs in recent years.
Yeah.
Especially in areas like image recognition, natural language processing, and speech synthesis.
Right. I've seen those mind-blowing demos where AI can generate like realistic images or translate languages in real time.
Yes,
That's all deep learning at work.
it is. So how would you explain deep learning to someone who's not familiar with it?
Well, I'd start by saying it involves training artificial neural networks with many layers.
Yes.
These layers allow the network to learn complex patterns from the data. And the cool thing is they can automatically extract features from the data so you don't have to manually engineer them.
That's a great explanation. It highlights the key difference between deep learning and traditional machine learning approaches.
Okay.
Think of it like building a tower with many floors. Each floor represents a layer of the neural network, and the higher you go, the more abstract and complex the features become.
Okay. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So the network learns these features hierarchically,
Yes.
starting with simple things like edges and shapes and building up to more complex concepts.
Oh, exactly. Now be prepared for follow-up questions like, what are the advantages of deep learning over traditional machine learning techniques?
Okay.
This is your chance to showcase your knowledge.
Okay, so I could mention that deep learning excels at handling high-dimensional data, like images or text.
Yes.
It can learn complex, nonlinear relationships,
All right.
which is essential for many real-world problems.
Yeah.
And it often achieves state-of-the-art performance in tasks like image recognition and natural language processing, where traditional methods struggle.
Perfect. You've hit all the key points. Remember, the goal is to demonstrate your understanding, not to overwhelm them with technical jargon.
Speaking of demonstrating understanding, I think this is a good time to bring in RoleCatcher's AI again.
Yes.
They have this incredible feature for tailoring your resume and interview answers, right?
They do. It's particularly useful for showcasing your experience with deep learning. Their AI analyzes the job description and identifies the specific deep learning frameworks or techniques that are relevant to the role.
So, for example, if the job description mentions TensorFlow or PyTorch, the AI will flag those as keywords and suggest ways to highlight your experience with them.
Exactly.
That's way more effective than just listing a bunch of technical skills on your resume.
It shows the interviewer that you've taken the time to understand their needs and that your skills directly align with what they're looking for.
Okay, so we've covered some advanced machine learning concepts, but all of this knowledge is useless if you don't actually land the job, right?
Right.
What are some common career paths for knowledge engineers, and how can thinking about those paths help you in the interview?
That's a great question. Knowledge engineering offers a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
You could specialize in a specific area like NLP computer vision or robotics, or you might move into leadership roles, managing teams of engineers, or leading AI initiatives within a company.
So how do you bring this up in an interview without sounding like you're already planning your exit strategy?
It's all about framing it as aligning your goals with the company's goals. Express your enthusiasm for the field and highlight your areas of interest. Then discuss your long-term aspirations and how they connect with the company's mission.
For example, you could say something like, I'm passionate about using AI to improve healthcare outcomes, and I'm particularly interested in applying deep learning to medical image analysis. In the future, I aspire to lead a team of engineers developing cutting-edge AI solutions for the healthcare industry.
Perfect. You've shown passion, highlighted relevant skills, and demonstrated that you're thinking long-term. And remember, the interview is a two-way street.
Right?
It's also your chance to ask insightful questions about the company's AI strategy team culture and opportunities for growth.
That's such an important point. It shows you're engaged and genuinely interested in the role. All right, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. Any final tips for acing that interview?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
First, be prepared to code. Knowledge engineer interviews often involve coding challenges.
Okay.
So brush up on your algorithms and data structures. Second, showcase your passion. Let them see your enthusiasm for AI and the impact you want to make. Third, think critically. Don't just give canned responses.
Right.
Ask insightful questions and demonstrate your analytical skills. Fourth, communicate clearly. Explain complex ideas in a way that anyone can understand.
Okay.
And use visuals or examples to illustrate your points.
Those are great tips. And don't forget to utilize those resources we talked about, like RoleCatcher's AI tools and career guides. They can help you tailor your application, practice your answers, and gain valuable insights into the industry.
Exactly. And remember, the journey to becoming a successful knowledge engineer is a continuous learning process. Embrace the challenges, stay curious, and never stop learning.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I feel like I've learned a ton, and I'm sure our listener has too.
It was my pleasure. Best of luck to everyone out there preparing for their knowledge engineer interviews.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another insightful exploration of a fascinating topic.